So, Joe, 16 years ago, the universe was in a hot, dense state.
Oh.
Yeah. And then expansion happened.
I mean, if you're listening and you're taking this literally, we've just officially changed the platform to a weird creationist cult. And everything literally started 16 years ago. It just feels longer. Or we're talking about the Big Bang Theory, one of the two things.
Yes. Yes. And not to be confused with the scientific Big Bang Theory, for those of you who are sitting there going, what the hell are they talking about?
This is a science podcast now? Since when?
We've been scientish with like some of the additional content we made last season.
Yeah, I think Science-E was a good way to describe it.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, what did I say? Scientish? Like, kind of went a little, yeah, a little Connery there, but that's fine. Yeah. Yeah, so the Big Bang Theory is one of those TV properties that you and I have talked about several times. We keep kicking this can down the road.
Mm-hmm.
And oddly enough, Joe, it also ends up being the third TV series that we've covered this year so far that also has a lot of people bitching about how it ended.
Which,
so,
I mean,
yeah.
Nothing is easy. I'm not saying nothing is easy, but it is difficult to really end something that's been going on for that long, because how can you possibly tie up, 12 seasons worth of content into, especially a half hour? How could you possibly take care of that? And people are going to find a way to get mad about everything. And this is where I thought maybe we would actually bring this up later in the podcast, bring up the finale, to save some things till then. But I think where I end up may be a little shocking, considering just kind of like where I've been on the series as a whole. I actually had to go back and watch the finale recently because I'd never seen it before. I kind of fell off around season 6 on this show. So maybe we do some highs and lows, ups and downs sort of things before we get quite to the finale.
What I was going to say, since we're talking about literally the origins of the universe, why don't we talk about the origins of the Big Bang universe?
Very wise. It's a good place to start.
I was going to say, why not? I mean, we're not going to do it like some of these movies where like we start at the end and then we flash back to the beginning and then we give little bits of context, which I think we also referenced somewhere along the way within like season 1. That same joke, man, I'm getting old. But yeah,
hey,
ultimately
probably a little late in the game to start the Quentin Tarantino format, but we could rebrand at any moment.
It's either we curse a ton more or feet everywhere. You can respond to the comments.
No.
Yeah.
No.
What would you like to see? Let us know. Yeah. But the origins of the Big Bang Theory TV show actually starts with a juggernaut of TV in general. Mm-hmm. And if you've ever looked at the credits, not just of this TV show, but several other major CBS shows, you've likely seen the name Chuck Lorre appear before. And no, he's not a large transport vehicle that's in the United Kingdom. He is a man who has been involved with TV for a very long time. He's one of the creative minds behind 2.5 Men, Mike and Molly, Young Sheldon, of course, the spinoff of this, Dharma and Greg. He was even an executive producer for Roseanne, which Roseanne fans will notice there's a lot of people who kind of came through that turnstile on over to this property. So, Joe, he's the king of sitcoms. What do you think of that?
It is hard to really dispute that, given his success rate with these things. Even like when you go as far back as Roseanne, you're looking in the 90s. This is the same era where you've got Seinfeld, Friends, and dare I say, the hidden of the big three, Frasier at the time. These are like three juggernauts of the sitcom world, and Roseanne was kind of, I don't want to say maybe the dark horse of them, but it was of the three, I guess of the four, the raunchiest of them because of Roseanne Barr's like humor. But it worked. It was something different compared to the other three, And like you said, we've gotten names coming out of that. I know Sarah Chalke went on to be in Scrubs, which was
Yeah.
very, very noticeable, very big for its time in the early 2000s. Maybe another one we cover here later on down the line. But the fact that he went on to do this and Two and a Half Men, which also huge, and the fact that that show kept going after they had to, I think, literally kill off one of the main characters because of his, his personal life and real life.
It's Tiger Blood.
Winning. Yeah. Just speaks volumes to what this man was able to do. And you can argue like against Two and a Half Men, Young Sheldon. I think he also like Mike and Molly. You can argue against all these things over say whether you think they're like a good sitcom or a bad sitcom. But at the same time, like they all continued for quite a while. They all had pretty solid ratings throughout their run until close to the end there. So they were successes whether we simply like them or not.
Just like a brutal car crash, whether or not you think it's a good thing, people are still watching it. That's kind of what happens here, and it's not just from Chuck Lorre's side of it. It's also Bill Prady, who is the other half of this. Technically, it's a three-headed monster, but the big two. So Bill Prady was also attached to Married with Children, Star Trek Voyager, Joe.
Ooh.
Yeah.
A non-sitcom entity within all of this.
Yeah, I was going to say, I was really hopeful that I would have been able to reference some really bitchin' like Star Trek song intros, but unfortunately Voyager's not the one.
No. I mean, it's not Faith of the Heart. It's not. It doesn't have lyrics or anything. And also, kind of like you're thinking, Voyager is like an odd thing on a resume that you're not sure if it actually applies, but you put it on there anyway. In this case, not to say like there's anything wrong with Voyager. I liked Voyager quite a bit, but we're looking at sitcoms. Voyager, we're not really known for its sitcominess.
Isn't it kind of like community service on your college resume, when you're applying, and then everyone's like, oh, very,
hey.
very nice. I'm doing the golf clap.
I see.
The really offensive, like, you did it. Congrats. Fantastic. Yeah. Yeah, but he was also attached to Gilmore Girls and the Muppets. He worked for like Jim Henson for a while. So
wow.
Like it's an interesting cocktail we've got going here.
I wonder if that came to help out Jim Parsons in the future when he got to be in a Muppet movie after The Big Bang was all said and done. Or was it done when that came out?
I think it was. We're kind of. I think we're in between like a couple things here because
we might be.
There's like the Muppets revival, and that happens I think midway through like the 2010s or something, and so it's all on the same. I mean, Joe, at this point we're getting so old we can pretend like things happen the way we thought, and no one's going to correct us because we're old. It's just how it works.
And then we eventually will devolve into the old Muppets screaming from a balcony, saying everything's bad.
Yeah.
Now to read the podcast. This sucks.
Yeah. When we started this, I had hair. Oh God, wait, that was true. Fuck.
No.
Well,
shit.
It's crazy what happens in 3 years, right? And, look, if you don't believe in the rigors of podcasting, I mean, we lose hair, we lose relationships, we misplace things. I don't know where my phone is right now. But either way, these guys had their shit together, Joe. And as I say that, though, that's not the case for the pilot of The Big Bang Theory, which, very similar to the pilot for Game of Thrones, they started off a certain way, and people went, hey guys, look, just come on in here for a second. Come on, just take a seat. Go ahead and take a seat right there. So guys, look, we love it. It's fantastic. But it fucking sucks, and we want you to take out half the cast and try it again.
Oh, well then. So maybe you didn't like it.
I think it was classic, Northeastern Mook, as we always call them, where it's like, all right. Here's what we're going to do. And then, like, everybody leans in. And like, all right, we love the concept, but we want you to strip it down as much as you possibly can and come back to us. Because initially, Joe, we had Johnny Galecki, we had Jim Parsons attached to like this original pilot, but nobody else survived. Everybody else was like, nope, we don't like these people. Moving on. Yeah. I mean, to be honest with you, this is all research stuff, Joe. Like, there's actresses, Amanda Walsh, who plays Katie, who is the prototypical Penny, right? Like, she was supposed to be who Penny ends up becoming, right? And then there was actress Iris Barr, who plays this Gilda, who's like a scientist, who is like friends with this like Katie person, right? Regardless, they were subtracted from the equation. They just completely cut them out, and the writers went back and said, okay, all right, so let's just condense those characters into one hot one who doesn't wear bras very often. What do you guys think of that?
Okay. Yeah, we could make that work. Yeah, it's almost like what happened to Claire in the Seinfeld pilot, where it's like, you know what, Claire is just a little too rough around the edges. We need someone who will still throw things back at the guys, but not be so abrasive about it. And then we got Elaine Bettis. There was no condensing of Claire. And we also all actually got to see Claire in the pilot, as opposed to these two.
Hey, well, fortunately, the pilot is floating out there on the internet. People found it. Chuck Lorre in the beginning was saying that you guys might see it one of these days. We're not going to be the ones who necessarily want you to see it, but once you do, let us know. It's pop culture history, right? Personally, I haven't watched it myself because I'm not brave enough. Maybe one day. But
it's maybe, or it could be like when I thought it'd be a great idea to find the American Sailor Moon pilot online, and it turned out could have gone without seeing it. Because my God, if there's anything more American than taking something else, really changing it to work and be really awkward, that was the Sailor Moon pilot. And but actually having the word work anywhere near that sentence and that pilot is very, very, like, you know, wrong of me, because holy crap, that was hot garbage. And that, like, I feel bad because there's a lot of child actors involved in this who I'm assuming went on to have no career after they really tried to hide and bury this pilot.
Yeah. Well, I mean, fortunately, things did work out here. I mean, it's. I wouldn't say this is uncommon necessarily, but you know, rewrites do happen quite a bit. Maybe there was something that producers saw. They were like, you know what, we're digging this, we're not digging that. Let's subtract this. Let's figure something else out. And you know, ultimately, that led to the creative team repurposing it and giving us the idea that made people billions of dollars in the end. So, yeah, 12 seasons, 279 episodes later, we're not complaining, are we? Yeah.
Well, I mean, like you said, of some series that were talked about, and there were one or two complaints of. This is one of those series where I think you have a very, very divided audience on, because some people absolutely just loved it and escaped into it and were totally fine with it, and then there are others who do non-stop talking about how you don't have characters but caricatures, and they will always happily point out the laugh track that was used in the show.
Which is ridiculous to me because it was recorded in front of a live audience. So it's not like How I Met Your Mother, where they recorded the laughs to the reactions of what they were actually producing and then putting that in. This was, nope, we've got the live audience, then we're going to add the laugh track, even though their reactions are here. So I don't even know which one I'd rather have, except for the fact that I know a very specific laugh that happens in every damn episode, and every time I hear it, I'm like, God, who thought they could get away with this?
Yeah. I mean, no, they don't honestly think that maybe the same guy is coming to every recording, and he's laughing the exact same way every time. And there's no way that's happening.
Well, the thing is, I know that there's some bullshitting going on with the Big Bang Theory and with How I Met Your Mother because I've heard the same laugh on both shows. So they had to have, because there's, and this is going to be hard for people to probably pick out, but there's this one laugh that always goes like, and you can't unhear it once you've heard it. Like, and then as soon as you hear it, like, yep, I'm picking it up every single time, but it's there. But the complaints about these guys, though, Joe, is that we've got really the show centered around two Caltech physicists and their neighbor, and I mean it's a good enough formula to introduce us to.
Yeah.
Like nowadays, I'm surprised that some of my favorite shows have like 15 main characters on them because I can't remember names in general. Frankly, I'm surprised I even remember your first name. That's just kind of how I am. And
I mean, if it wasn't on the screen, I'm sure it had been gone long ago.
I know. I was just kind of hoping and trying to figure out all these different ways I can find out your information without asking you. You know, just like Jerry Seinfeld.
Hey, it's a good thing we met wearing name tags on our costumes. Otherwise, we'd have no idea who each other are.
Yeah. We've been doing a podcast now for 3 years and over 100 episodes, and we don't know each other's names. No clue.
Part of our charm.
Yeah. So here's something that I would like to ask you, Joe. Do you remember the first time you saw Johnny Galecki, who plays Leonard Hofstadter, one of the three original characters here that we're focusing on?
It's a little unfair for me to answer this now because I know the answer to this because of someone telling to me while the show was going on, and I had watched Johnny Galecki basically probably 2 or 3 times a year, every year, throughout my childhood growing up, in a movie you may have heard of called National Lampoon's Christmas Vacation. Because he had played Rusty in that. So he was very prominent there. And I had gotten through, I think, probably 3 seasons of Big Bang Theory before, I don't want to say I put those things together that this was the same human being from one role to the next. I was definitely told, yeah, that's Rusty from National Lampoon's Christmas Vacation, which is just crazy to me because, like, obviously, like, the National Lampoon's Vacation movies were a staple in many households in the 80s and 90s. And if you are familiar with them, while Chevy Chase and why am I forgetting? She plays the mom, and it's killing me.
Oh wow, that's file
Beverly
not found
D'Angelo.
for me right now. Yes,
Beverly D'Angelo. Yes. While those two are always playing the Griswolds, the kids change every movie. So there's someone different every single movie. It's just what happens. They don't care about it continuing or anything. It's like, nope, this is just what happens. So, like, there's not like we got to see Johnny Galecki like grow from movie to movie, and we would see, oh hey, he eventually morphed into Leonard. It's like, nope. It was just little Johnny Galecki, Leonard. And I didn't know the two apart. I didn't know the two were the same.
So I did happen to put that together because we also watched that show or that movie many times, even though I don't remember the actresses' names, unfortunately. But there was another film with him in 1997 called Suicide Kings, where he actually, together with him and a bunch of 20-somethings, kidnap a mobster who's played by Christopher Walken.
Oh.
And it's actually a really good movie where he plays a pretty good role. He's not quite like whiny Leonard or anything, but he's still kind of like this reserved, a little kind of nerdy dude. He's got a conscience while the rest of them are kind of running wild with this gig. And there's one thing about this I wanted to mention because he's the one who definitely treats the mobster as if he's a real person and not just a killer, right?
Oh.
And so Christopher Walken has this amazing line with him as he's being let go, and he's like, "Ira, you are the man." And I will never forget it. It's ridiculous, but the movie's actually really good, and that's where most of my early memories of Johnny Galecki actually came from, was this film. So suddenly, when I'm like watching The Big Bang Theory for the first time, I'm like, holy shit, that's Ira. He's the man, you know.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, but Jim Parsons though, so Mr. Sheldon Cooper himself, not quite as recognizable when he gets this gig.
Mm-hmm.
And Joe, I don't even know if it's worth asking you if you remember where he's from before this show, but do you have any guesses?
uh, you know, I know it was a commercial. I know that because I remember seeing him on the show and being like, he's familiar. I know him. Where is he from? And I couldn't put my finger on it, but I just knew. Like either someone showed me the commercial because someone showed it to me on YouTube. You know, back when YouTube was ad free, and you didn't have to pay for the no ad thing. They looked it up and found it. But for the life of me, I can't remember what commercial it was.
Oh, fortunately, I have the answer because it actually was controversial as shit back when it came out.
Really?
So Jim Parsons was part of a Quiznos commercial that people have dubbed Raised by Wolves. And normally a Quiznos commercial wasn't really going to upset anybody, right? We had like this is the same era where we had those really weird looking, was it squirrels with the big teeth thing or rats or whatever the fuck they were?
Yeah. I just remember them like saying that they have a pepper bar, and they were really weird looking. So
it's the same creative bullshit that this comes out of. Okay, so this Raised by Wolves concept had two versions. So they had they called like an AM version of it, and then they had a PM version.
Ooh.
So Jim Parsons plays this guy who's eating his sandwich with a friend on a bench, and the friend says to him, "What, man, were you raised by wolves or something?" And then Jim Parsons goes into this like flashback where he's hanging out with wolves in a den, but he's still wearing the same suit that he has on in the present, right?
Okay.
So the clean version is him hanging out with the wolves, and they're just kind of in the forest, right? The reason why people flipped out about this is because the PM version of this has Jim Parsons in the same suit, but he's feeding off the nipple of the wolf like the rest of the pups are. And that's how a lot of people get introduced to Jim Parsons.
I mean, there are weirder ways to make a career.
I mean, which would you prefer? Like hey, I'm 5 minutes late, or yeah, I was the one that was sucking off the tit of a wolf.
I mean, if it helps people remember you, then it's not a bad role.
Yeah, heroes get remembered, kid, but legends never die. All right. Fortunately for Kaylee Cuoco, who plays Penny, she didn't have to go through that type of thing to be noticed. She was on 8 Simple Rules for Dating My Teenage Daughter, and when John Ritter passed away, you almost have to wonder if this was like a silver lining for her to open up and to have the opportunity to be a part of this. I'm not saying there's ever a silver lining in the death of a beloved, icon like him, but fortunately that's. I mean, imagine who else would have been in play, right, if she was still on that show.
Yeah, and if that show kept going, and like nothing against that show, and obviously it's hard to compare the two, given that one had to get cut, one was cut short because of the death of John Ritter, but like, I don't know if that show would have reached the same acclaim, notoriety, however you want to look at it, the same level that Big Bang reached in pop culture. Because again, like as much like shit as people want to give this show, like I think we owe a little bit of how popular nerd culture has become, or more how accepted it's become, a little bit into this show. Well, we can say that like obviously like Marvel had a huge bit of it, of having superhero movies be like as big as they are and as can reach as big of an audience as they can. Now that's surely something, but like, would Comic-Con and everything else be as like kind of like events to go to and things to do if we didn't see these characters doing them? I think we owe the show a little bit, or at least pop culture owes a little bit to the show for letting everyone be nerdy and it being okay.
And we've talked about the nerd tide before. Like this show was just lifting off in 2007. And yeah, as you mentioned, Joe, the Comic-Cons are starting to get a little bit more commercialized, right? We're starting to see more of these traveling shows pop up, and celebrities are now being more accessible than they ever have been before. I do agree with you, because this show, and I'll take this question normally, because I've been putting you and other people on the spot going, put this show in your own words, right?
Yes.
Put this movie in your own words. I'll take this one for once. This show was really about how intelligent people, who are obviously nerds, right? How they navigate life, how they balance their work lives, how they balance these geeky, nerdy, dorky things that they also have interests in. And then growing beyond that and building relationships, right? And like you're literally watching these man boys become, grown ass men in a lot of ways. And I'm not even ashamed to say that, because a lot of us who are nerds end up getting that man boy moniker, whatever you want to call it, that label put on us. But at the same time, this show does put out there that, yeah, these people can have successful careers and still enjoy the things that have historically not been mainstream entertainment, right? And that's what this really did become the platform for. And not just visualizing it, but showing that even if it's a fictional character, it's still possible. So
yeah, and I think that's kind of where I think most of us really should kind of land on this series. Well, obviously you can always you can love it, hate it. It's you can do what you want. It's not going to be everyone's taste. And when we look at the general complaint is that we don't necessarily have characters. We have basically the absolute most, I want to say hardcore, but I don't think it works for them, but the most nerdcore possible stereotypes in this show. Nerdcore. But when we look at it, we've got Leonard, who we can argue is the most well-adjusted of the group, in that he's smart, he's intelligent, but he still dresses incredibly nerdy all the time, every single day, and kind of holds the group together in the middle. You've got Sheldon, who is insanely intelligent, so much that he doesn't understand how humans work, because he doesn't understand social interactions at all. He is when you say a man-child, he is that to an extreme, because if he doesn't get the seat that he normally sits in, or he doesn't have a certain thing done at a certain time that he's used to, he panics, he freaks out, and he doesn't know how to handle it. And you can see kind of this internal meltdown every time he does it. And then you have, again, in the same vein of these two characters who don't know how to either act with the rest of society. You have Howard Wolowitz, played by Simon Helberg, and he is so inept with talking to women, but he doesn't really, he at the same time doesn't get that, but also gets it in a weird way. And that of the group, he seems to put off this vibe that if any of us could get a girl, it's probably going to be him, just because he will actually talk to them more frequently with the intent of trying to hook up with them or date them. Except, of course, he fails miserably all the time because he looks like Howard Wolowitz. And he acts like Howard Wolowitz. He's incredibly perverted and just kind of almost the worst kind of nerd you can have.
I was going to say, it's not enough to just classify him as that, though, because you talked about the appearances of both, Sheldon and Leonard, and Howard looks like he was ripped out of a 70s fashion catalog, except he's a 5'4" dude, so it's even more comedic and pronounced.
Yes.
So he's got these bizarre striped t-shirts and these massive belt buckles and high fastening pants, and
he's rocking a bowl cut for most of the show, if not all.
Almost the whole damn thing. Yeah.
Yep.
It's not good.
And then just tying the whole group together is we have Raj Koothrappali, played by Kunal Nayar, I believe is how you pronounce his real name.
Yeah.
And he is from India, incredibly intelligent, and the absolute worst with women, where I believe it's not even till like season like 4 where they find out the only way he can talk to women is if he's been drinking. Because before then, like, it was actually a pretty like a fun ongoing gag of Penny would purposely ask him questions, knowing full well he will just suddenly stop talking and won't say anything at all. And it was a funny gag. And that's actually a credit to give to the show, is they knew when to stop that joke or when it wasn't fun anymore, and they had Raj start actually adapting and changing. But and that's something I think he basically has to happen throughout most of the series, where he cannot talk to women unless he's been drinking.
Which doesn't make any sense, because there's parts of the show in the beginning where they're in the cafeteria and there's clearly women right next to him that are around him.
Yeah.
Can talk just fine. So, I mean
maybe it's talking to the women is where he messes up. It's not, the women around is okay, but as soon as he has to say something directly to them, that's when the panic strikes.
It's even when Penny's just there in the apartment with them. He can't talk even if she's like 2 seats over, you know? And
that's true.
And there are parts of this in like I said, in the university, in the cafeteria, there's a woman right behind him. And he's fine. So I agree with you that killing the joke made sense, like get rid of it after a certain point. But what I do like about this, Joe, is we're kind of expanding this universe out a little bit, is that I do appreciate that they didn't try to do way too many character introductions. They kept the early portions of the show very specific to developing, you know, Leonard, Sheldon, and Penny, and kind of keeping them as the focus. And then these supporting characters, even though Howard and Raj are big parts of it, they weren't like the main focus. And over time, though, they did start getting more of the limelight, but not at first. And so I thought that was a good idea. I think they performed it well, and there was plenty to laugh at and enjoy even with that focus.
Yeah, I would agree. Like, this is a scenario where we don't have like the Ross and Rachel thing going on with Leonard and Penny. Obviously, the first 2 seasons are they going to do it? Oh, they did it. They're breaking up. Things are weird. And they kind of do that for, I think, at most 3 seasons. I think the Justice League episode, they break up. After they had gotten together, after they get back from the season 2 finale. If you watch the show, at the end of season 2 is where the 4 get a grant to go study in Antarctica to see if they can prove one of Sheldon's theories. And they come back, and then Leonard and Penny that get swept up in each other after not seeing each other for a while. They start a relationship, and I think they break up during that season before they eventually get back together. And what I'm trying to get at here is that they don't really toy around with that for too long. And because they don't do that, they do have the ability to really explore the relationships of the other characters. And they can do that by introducing new characters that start out seemingly as just simple love interests for the rest of the cast when you get Bernadette and Amy joining. But while it seems like they're like, okay, these are just more like cheap characters, hooray, we get to see a few relationship quirks with the others, they actually become integral parts of the show themselves and become like, you know, fan favorites for many. So it's really great that they were able to take something that they knew worked for a while and knew that they couldn't just stretch and drag that for the longest time and have, you know, Leonard date like, what is it, fucking 30 women in the course of this show before finally ending up with who we thought he was going to in the first place.
It's like, not nope, Ted Mosby
that's
bad.
Cemented.
Yeah, it's not Ted Mosby bad. It's definitely like a 7 to 10. I think there's encounters. It feels a little more believable than you know, telling your children a story over the course of what seems like 10 years. But you know, whatever. But to your point, though, yes, Mayim Bialik is Amy Farrah Fowler, and then Melissa Rauch is Bernadette. They added more than just being a face for someone else to love on, and you're absolutely right. But what I love about Mayim specifically is that she actually has a PhD in neuroscience and actually has a really strong grasp on biology, and she ended up complementing their in-house expert scientist that they had from University of California by the name of David Salzberg. He is a professor of physics and astronomy and actually helped them with most of the whiteboarding exercises where they're writing stuff and the equations need to look a certain way. Mm-hmm. But over time, once Mayim was part of part of the cast, they're just like, "Hey, you actually know this, right?" And she's like, "Oh yeah, I can validate that." so it was like
Dave hasn't been fucking with us this whole time, has he? Like...
yeah, right. I'm gonna say, Dave, he's a trickster, isn't he?
Yeah, he got us. He got us good. That was 7 seasons of that nonsense.
Yeah, but to your point, man, like, when you see certain characters get added to a show, I know that people always have their favorites and their not so favorites. I never really felt that way with any of these characters, although you did find out that Bernadette is really kind of mean as the series goes on, and she doesn't realize it, and then she slowly gets told by other people. It's like, yeah, we're afraid of how mad you can be at us. Didn't know how to tell you. So, like, I don't really think that's something to dock her for, but it was something that was really funny because she's the shortest character on the show, but she's the angriest.
And I think that's a juxtaposition that kind of works. Like, you know how, like, ironically you have a really big guy and you call him tiny, that you have this really short and very sweet sounding individual who can actually really scare everyone really, really easily.
Oh yeah. Which, when we talk about Stuart, the comic book shop owner, who's played by Kevin Sussman, now, ironically enough, he actually tried out for several roles on this show. I think he was even up for Sheldon at one point. Didn't end up getting it, of course. But then they brought him back and said, "Hey, we think we have a role for you that we think you'd be a good fit for." And Stuart's not like a main character in the beginning. Obviously, we know who he is. He's very self-deprecating. He's always poor and always suffering through the worst of life.
Which I imagine is most comic shop owners. And that it's just because of, you know, the industry. But I think, again, of people complaining about inaccuracies, that's probably accurate.
I feel like that's pretty accurate because, I mean, he's living out of the comic book shop at one point. He's always trying to get free food. You know, and all the characters know this, right? So not like it's a surprise to anyone. But I think the funny thing to watch out for in the beginning of the show, because we're not going to cover all the seasons just like we did with Game of Thrones and everything. But what's funny here is that when we do expand this cast out, we get introduced to both Sheldon and Leonard's moms. So Sheldon's mom is played by Laurie Metcalf. Once again, Roseanne fans, you'll recognize her. And then Christine Baranski, who I, of course, always remember her for The Grinch. She's the lady shooting the light cannon at her house and all that. So I recognize her from that part of it. But I love how they use the moms as a way to explain the sons.
Yes.
And Leonard's mom, like, she is just, she's so mean towards him because she's so proud of the other kids. And Leonard's just this afterthought for so long, you know, and you can tell. And it makes you feel so bad for him. But then when he screws up, you're almost like, that's not your mom's fault anymore. Like, you can't blame her for all of that. But I don't know. I love that dynamic. I don't know about you.
I do, and this is where, like, again, like the very opposite nature of Sheldon's mom versus Leonard's mom, because then you have Sheldon's mom, who is super supportive of Sheldon, despite being very different from Sheldon, because Sheldon, like, again, like we said, is very much he is very much the scientist. That is, everything needs to be concrete and well explained. And then you have his very religious mother, who loves Sheldon to death, is proud of him and supports him, but, you know, is very much going to be at church all the time and be, you know, a little upset that Sheldon doesn't go to church anymore, but also accept him for who he is. So that juxtaposition of mothers is very fun to see what it does to the characters. But another thing that I'd like to like praise the show for is its service towards like nerd community by involving a lot of cameos. So, and this is also in a time where like it's pre like same time. I don't want to say maybe not same like pre MCU cameo stuff that's building this universe, but at the same time we are getting people from the titles that these characters are big fans of, like Star Wars and Star Trek and any other sci-fi series showing up on this show, where like we've got a Stan Lee cameo where he's on and he's tired of all these nerds like bugging him at his house. You've got Summer Glau, they meet her on a train, which is a great episode over how much Sheldon absolutely loved trains, and then to this day, I will always use a Howard Wolowitz quote when I say, yeah, because who doesn't love transportation that takes 3 times as long and is just as expensive as a plane? So it's brilliant. Trains are inefficient and stupid, and I hate them because they're not like they are in countries where they make sense and they move really fast. I digress. You have that. Will Wheaton is a caricature, or like not a caricature, I've done that too much, but a character of himself, where he really, like, I don't know, eats up the fact that he was a child star and uses that to advantage to skip ahead of them in a movie line, or just like basically cut Sheldon off at every like possible pass. And then you even get Sarah Michelle Gellar ends up on the show as a cameo. So all these fun little things over, hey, and top of that, all these cameos are like the people being themselves. So all of the characters in the show, except for Penny, because Penny never watched any of these things, are always just as excited as we are to see them show up on screen.
And I was going to say that we might as well call that our first high of this series, because I agree with you on that. The highs were really fun because, as you mentioned, Joe, MCU kind of kicks off 2008, 2009, I think, officially in that era. So right at the beginning of this show, and it expands from there. We get Neil deGrasse Tyson. We get Will. You mentioned Will Wheaton, but we get LeVar Burton. Bill Nye shows up. Stephen Hawking is in multiple episodes, and even James Earl Jones pops in at one point. And you find out he's kind of like a party animal, which is really funny. But I would say one of my other highs, though, is the whole "we shall," the whole the idea of Sheldon holding this years-long grudge because Wheaton didn't show up to a convention that he was supposed to be at, and then he freaks out about it. And of course, when he finally does meet up with Will years later, Will Wheaton does kind of take on the same persona that he did on The Guild, where he's kind of like this really, I don't know, just bullish nerd, and like he wears it proudly, because that's what you think that a lot of these nerds can behave like, is like this. There's like levels of aggressive nerd out there, and so this whole concept of like negative Wheaton is really funny to me. That him and Sheldon just have this mortal enemies thing going on. But I love that. The other thing though for me is that I really just enjoy how the show begins. The damn intro, the Bare Naked Ladies. That I quoted the song in the very beginning of this. I don't usually skip the intro to this show. But I don't know about you.
No. Yeah. It's a banger, which is again just becoming more and more of a lost art in the modern era, in that shows usually don't have a theme anymore. They just roll into the show. They may just have like a little title thing on the bottom, and then they just kind of go for it from there. And while not everyone can have the what am I thinking? The slap of Seinfeld.
The bass slap.
Yeah, bass slap. That's what I'm going for. For some reason, I thought there was some sort of other jazzy term that I was supposed to use there. But like Seinfeld made the bass slap work and didn't need a theme song to necessarily. They just had like a little jingle going while Jerry told a joke. But like that's kind of what things have moved to. And this show's like, no, we're gonna have a straight up theme song. So that was that was just, and again, like getting a band to do it too, a well-known band for the time. It worked, and it still works. It's very catchy. It fits the show very well without necessarily explaining the show in the theme song itself. So I was a fan. I still am a fan. But if I have to think of like two more highs, one small one would be any time you've got Sheldon and Penny interacting with no other character around them, because they kind of are these polar opposites of Sheldon is alpha nerd guy and Penny is like incredibly hot socially active woman who like doesn't care about the science thing at all. And then whenever they're together, it's always awkward and fun. So like you can think of times like when Penny falls down in the shower and Sheldon has to help her.
Yes.
Or when then Sheldon gets sick and Penny has to sing to him. Like, whenever those two are alone for an episode, it's going to be a fun episode.
Yeah, I agree with that a lot. And the one thing I want to call out about Penny, also a high point for me, is that she does act as like the character who represents most of the audience, right? Like she's the one who's quote unquote normal. And to the point of this nerd tide that you've mentioned, Joe, her transformation is a lot like a lot of people who never had heard of some of these superhero films that we're watching now and inundated with. And people slowly kind of came over to that and realized there's a lot of entertainment value here. And her character kind of does the same thing. She doesn't interact with any of these properties. She's not, I mean, there's even an episode where she plays the MMO that they're all playing and she gets addicted to it. And, you know,
it's a great episode.
It's so damn funny. And like, that's the stuff I think about where you're almost, the show is almost an experiment in itself where it's like showing people that it's like, you can enjoy this stuff too. You can go for this. And I know that's not what they like. There wasn't a mission statement or anything, but just the visual of seeing that, I think that was really funny, and I thought it was executed well. And for me, her transformation is definitely another high point of the series.
Yeah, absolutely. But like always, not every show can be all rise all the time. We have to have some lower points to it. So, Mark, where would a low point or a not greatness factor of the show lie for you?
So, as much as I love the expanded cast and what they do, because these extra dynamics can be fun, I don't want to call this like a specific high of just the single life of the nerds, but I guess maybe like this is our transition. The show begins as watching nerds be nerds, and that's what was entertaining at first, right? Like it's funny seeing these people who are kind of socially inept try to figure it out, and to me that was where most of the entertainment value came from. The show over time, though, becomes heavily relationship focused as you get into some of the later seasons, and they're having babies and like all this other stuff's happening. People are getting married. And for me, that's where I started to fall off, kind of like what you mentioned. I think there's a lot of people who fell off after season 6, maybe season 7, whatever, because the dynamic completely changes. So instead of laughing because you're like, oh, a nerdy person did nerdy thing, you're like, no. Nerdy character didn't listen to their spouse, and now I have to watch the drama that unfolds. And personally, did not love it as much. I still stuck with it, but I think that's why a lot of people began to taper off. And I don't know if that was you. I mean, does that mirror your experience?
So I think what made me end up tapering off it was less to do with the show, so much to do with like I think there's me moving around and not having cable anymore and not having access to watch the show it was the biggest thing that hurt me. But I would, and this is where it's odd, where I am going to mirror you a little bit here in saying that, yes, you it seems like the show lost the heart of what it was supposed to be about. So when I would try watching things and then it's like, oh, okay, Sheldon like made Amy mad again because Sheldon is Sheldon. So instead of making the group mad with his weirdness, he's made his girlfriend mad or eventually his wife mad. Because like we said, like the show kind of shifts and changes from nerdiness to relationships and life changing. But this is where I'm actually going to pull like a weird like 180 on this, because where I think, well, that is also a weakness of the show, when we get to the finale of the show, which we said usually finales are like, divisive for a lot of audiences, that's where it actually came around and made sense to me. Because again, like I said, I fell off the show, and then we decided we were going to do the episode. I decided I was going to do like this weird microcosm of the show, where I'm going to watch the very first episode, and then I'm going to watch the middle episode of the middle season of the show. So I watched season 6, episode 12, because that's the dead center. And then I went to the very end of the show and I watched the finale for the first time while getting ready to watch this. So I had been away from the characters for a while, and I knew what the show was turning into. And then when you see them wrap up the show, and you've got obviously Howard and Bernadette, they've got kids. They're now more worried about the kids than some of their more nerdy endeavors. You've got Leonard and Penny pregnant is what's revealed in the last episode, and they're getting ready to move on with their life. Sadly, there's no real growth for Raj. It's just him and his dog, and he is where he is. But like the biggest thing that I think works is that Sheldon was always basically unchanged throughout the entire thing, as he never quite got it. That how he said things, despite the meaning he actually felt, could still affect other people in a negative way that he didn't intend. And he finally gets it in the last episode. And
he softens a ton.
He softens so much. And the way he chooses to actually kind of call himself out on that and recognize all the other characters and completely put something away that he'd been looking forward to literally the entire series, to acknowledge his friends, and then you see that they're all moving on and they're getting ready to do other things. I feel like that mirrors life so very well, and that like how we have an idea of where we are and what we want to do, and that changes. And even if it's not in our, what we would have thought was for the better at some point in time of our life, and that we thought the single fun nerdy life was going to stay that way and that was the best way, we find something else that over time shows us that maybe for who I am right now, this is actually a lot better than what I thought it was going to be when I was younger, wanting to do something different. And while we end the show without like full closure, there is no, they've all completely moved away from each other, they've moved on, they're still friends. We end with an acoustic version of the theme song. They're all sitting on the couch eating takeout like they did when the show first started.
Yep.
And I thought it pulled everything together incredibly nicely, where we can see these characters still have more story to tell, but we think that part is better left untold and left for the audience to imagine on their own.
And be honest with you, it's not really entirely the fault of even the writers at this point. Like, this is something I want to be very specific about, because Jim Parsons really wavered back and forth, very similar to Jason Segel for How I Met Your Mother. He wasn't really sure if he wanted to keep doing this, the amount of time investment, the other things he wanted to do. Remember, he started in off-Broadway. Like, he loves the performance, and people took a chance on him to even do theater, so for him it meant a lot. And so to not do that kind of stuff anymore and to be focused just on this, he fought a lot to go, do I even want to come back? If I do come back, does something have to change, right? And so when he finally did decide, I'll do one last season, it floored everybody, because he basically cut down the careers of everybody else at that point, right? It's like, hey guys, I'm sorry, I can't do this anymore. Like, I know this is a moneymaker for everybody, but I can't do it anymore. So they had no choice. They had to figure out a way to wrap this up. And I do think in a lot of ways, the TV shows ending, no one's ever going to be truly happy with it. No. But to your point, that imagery is what stuck with me at the end of it. It wasn't really, did we stumble through that last season? I didn't really care. It's how I feel at the end. And that shot that you mentioned also stuck with me. And I was like, I can't be mad.
No. And see, that's the thing. Like, when we compare this to like another series that we do love, like we go with Seinfeld, because again, it was the staple. It was the bar that was set for sitcoms in the 90s. And you get this episode where suddenly like they're going to jail because everyone from the series who they've ever made mad is testifying against their character in this case, and they go to jail. It's aggravating because it's like that's how you're going to end it. They all go to jail, but then you've also got from the other side of saying, you know what, they are actually bad people who think they're good, and that's kind of the point of the show. So it kind of makes sense. You can see the divisiveness with that. Whereas with this one, I just find it really hard to look at the end of this show, and when you see all the characters still being friends, they've clearly done other things with their lives. They have all, mostly all, have grown so much from the start of the show, and yet you see that they're still always going to, at the same time, retain that friendship from the start of it and a little bit of that innocence from the start of it. I'm not gonna lie, there's a small part of me that got a little choked up when you had that song playing and they were there and you saw everything that happened to that episode and you think back to what happened through the series. Like, it's hard to hate it in that moment. And even if you don't like the God, you hate the 23 minutes that led up to that 1 minute moment at the end, it leaves you with a really good high off after everything the show has done. And I think that makes it one of the more successful sitcom endings that's ever been written.
And really, at the end of it all, when you look at this show, it's funny how so much of it is similar to other sitcoms. We have the will they, won't they stuff that's always floating around on these sitcoms. Yes, that's there. But really the focus of this show, I think, and we're not just talking about string theory. We're not physicists. We're not going to talk about string theory. But the real focus about this show ends up being the various miscommunications that people have. And when you have these like hyper nerds trying to communicate with non-nerds, it creates this friction. And that's what keeps people coming back. It's that, are they going to be able to overcome this one, right? Whether it's Howard saying something insanely stupid or, Sheldon saying something dumb at the wrong time and then pissing someone off for the next 20 minutes. But for this show, you get plenty of things that seem zany. They seem a little weird. They seem a little off, like the soft kitty, warm kitty that you talked about a little earlier. But it works for these characters. This stuff works for them. And I really do think that you get enough time to develop all these things. For the exception of Raj, we kind of just, you mentioned that. But I think for the most part, we get a good development for a lot of these characters. And I don't think we're done with them yet. I think they may still come back again. Really, I do.
I would watch them in any capacity, to be honest. If we had a reunion episode, which has become very popular for old sitcoms recently, is having everyone get back together for either just we see the actors talking about things, or we have little shorts. Like we've had, what was it? We had Jerry and George get back together just talking in the diner for a weird ad, or they get back together with another show, or we do like a straight up like Parks and Rec during COVID had a city meeting of the characters as COVID was going on, and it was a fun way of doing it. So I mean, I would watch them again in any capacity, and that could be involving where they are now. We introduce a new will they, won't they situation, and one thing I can guarantee you that we will do is thank all of you for listening to Digital Dissection, because we always appreciate everything that you do as the Dissection crew week after week, because your support really does go a long way. And if you happened upon this show by accident, why not leave us a review, rate us, and maybe a like, a subscribe here and there, because we'd appreciate all of that very much.
And we also love hearing from you, after all, so feel free to message us over at digitaldissectionpodcast@gmail.com. We welcome your ideas for future shows and possibly TV shows that ended that you didn't really appreciate that ending for. And well, anything else you'd like to discuss, so long as it's tastefully done. And until next time, keep on dissecting.